Imagine getting a letter from your HOA, not about your lawn, not about your fence, but about cats. Not one, not two, but three cats you supposedly own. The only problem, you've never owned a cat in your life. That's right, zero. Yet somehow, your HOA insists these invisible pets are running wild through the neighborhood, disturbing the peace, and violating the sacred no-pet policy. Today's story is one of the most ridiculous HOA tales I've ever read. A homeowner battling an overzealous board, fighting eviction over imaginary cats, and the revenge. Oh, it's priceless. Now, before you laugh this off as some silly misunderstanding that got resolved with a quick conversation, let me tell you it didn't. This story spiraled into a full-on battle of absurdity, with the HOA doubling down on their accusations and the resident fighting back in the most epic, notarized, two-page smackdown letter you've ever heard of. This is the saga of how an innocent homeowner ran, was accused, judged, and threatened over imaginary cats, and how the HOA Karen ended up making a fool of herself in front of the entire community. So let's set the scene. Ran lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of suburban place where everything looked picture perfect at first glance. Lawns were neatly trimmed, driveways were free of clutter, and neighbors waved politely when you drove by. But behind the manicured hedges and freshly painted shutters was the shadowy presence of the HOA, a board of people who seemed to think they were running a miniature dictatorship. These were the kinds of folks who measured the length of your grass with a ruler, fined you if your trash bin was visible for more than 20 minutes after pickup, and sent passive-aggressive notices if your Christmas lights weren't taken down by January 2nd. You know the type. Now, homeowner Ryan wasn't the kind of person who liked drama. He paid dues on time, kept the yard in good shape, and generally stayed out of trouble. In fact, he barely interacted with the HOA at all. But one sunny afternoon, he opened his mailbox and saw an official envelope from the HOA. Inside was a letter that would mark the beginning of one of the strangest battles he'd ever face. The letter stated, in bold, accusatory language, that the resident was in violation of community pet rules. Specifically, it claimed he was harboring not one, not two, but three cats in his home, in direct violation of the HOA's pet policy. It demanded immediate removal of the cats and warned of escalating fines, legal action, and even eviction if the resident failed to comply. At first, Ryan laughed. Surely, this was a mistake. Maybe the HOA mixed up addresses. Maybe some other neighbor had cats, and the complaint got pinned on the wrong house. But as he read on, it was clear the letter was directed at him by name, with his address printed in bold. Here's the kicker, Ryan didn't own cats. He didn't even particularly like cats. No litter boxes, no scratching posts, no bags of kibble, nothing. The entire accusation was completely fabricated. So, being a reasonable person, Ryan decided to clear things up. He sent a polite email to the HOA, stating simply, "I don't own any cats." There must be some mistake. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? But oh no, this was just the beginning. Within days, the HOA fired back with another letter, doubling down on his claims. They insisted that multiple complaints had been filed against the resident. Neighbors, they claimed, had reported seeing cats through the windows. Others said they heard meowing late at night. The HOA warned that if the cats weren't removed within 2 weeks, fines of $100 per day would begin to accumulate. At this point, Ryan was baffled. Not only did he not own cats, but nobody had even been in their home recently who could have mistaken anything for pets. Where were these phantom cats coming from? Were neighbors making things up? Was the HOA hallucinating? Or was this some bizarre vendetta? But things escalated quickly. The HOA sent yet another notice, this time more aggressive, warning that failure to comply could result in legal proceedings and possible foreclosure. Imagine being threatened with losing your home over pets you didn't even have. That's when Ryan decided enough was enough. He wasn't just going to keep sending polite denials. No, he was going to respond in a way the HOA could never ignore. He sat down and drafted a 2-page letter, meticulously detailing the absurdity of the situation. He included a sworn statement declaring he had no cats nor any other animals in his possession. To top it off, he had the entire letter notarized, making it an official legal document. The message was crystal clear. I do not own cats. I have never owned cats. There are no cats in my home. Stop accusing me of imaginary pets. When the HOA received this notarized smackdown, you'd think they'd finally admit their mistake. But if you know anything about power-hungry HOAs, you already know they don't like being proven wrong. Instead of apologizing, they tried to save face by saying they would continue monitoring the situation. Monitoring what, exactly? Empty rooms, silent hallways, non-existent meows in the night. But here's where it gets even better. Word of the whole fiasco started to spread among the neighbors. Some thought it was hilarious, others were outraged at the HOA's behavior. A few even began making jokes about the ghost cats haunting the neighborhood. Pretty soon, the story became a local legend. People would walk by the house and jokingly ask if they could pet the invisible kitties. The HOA, meanwhile, was fuming. They had picked a fight they couldn't win, and now the entire community was laughing at them. Their credibility was tanking. If they couldn't even prove that a homeowner had cats, how could they enforce any of their other petty rules? Eventually, the HOA had no choice but to quietly drop the issue. They never admitted they were wrong. Of course, they just stopped sending letters, stopped issuing threats, and pretended like the whole thing never happened. But the damage was done. The neighbors saw through their nonsense, and the resident had established themselves as someone who wouldn't be bullied by ridiculous accusations. In the end, the homeowner got the last laugh. He didn't pay a single fine, he didn't remove any pets, and he didn't bow to the HOA's imaginary crusade. Instead, Ryan turned the tables with a notarized letter that exposed just how ridiculous the whole situation was. And the moral of the story: sometimes the best way to deal with power-hungry bullies is to hold up a mirror and let them embarrass themselves. The HOA wanted to play cat and mouse, but in this case, there weren't any cats, and the only ones caught looking foolish were the people running the association. So the next time your HOA sends you a threatening letter over something absurd, remember this story. Remember the homeowner who stood their ground against imaginary cats. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to play their ridiculous game.